The makeup's freshly applied, the lipstick's on, I've got earrings. We're happy.
Look, this shouldn't have happened. This shouldn't have happened. You could have figured out some time, but the only thing is that the schedule, you can see how it totally.
Absolutely.
And as the week comes, last week comes in, it's all been jam-packed. So, I mean, I'm sorry about that. It's something which just happens. But I'm not going to let you come in only in a minute because we have to put this up. What are we doing here?
Oh, thanks.
Of course, the World Mediators Conference, and Helen has picked up the topic. The idea is that people have chosen their topic. So it's not that I have chosen the topic. So what I've learned from my students is what she's doing. And Helen is now going to tell us about the conference, anything that she's seen, what's little feedback, and then it's all yours, Helen.
Thank you. So I have listened, well, I listened a little bit today to a presentation. I think it was in Spanish. Well, I know it was in Spanish. And I didn't understand a word, but I enjoyed reading the captions underneath. That was great. And then I did listen to a lot, I think it was certainly several days ago, I think a conversation around AI, artificial intelligence, and what's moving forward there. So that being said, I didn't listen to too much because I think I was listening quite late at night, but there you go. So
no, the thing was that, look, for me, I'm just putting that content out. Let it stay. People watch it today, watch it after 5 years, whenever it is. At least let's put all that. So now I, for that, in that sense, there is lots. So that more than 600 videos there, more than 600 hours of programming. Let's now concentrate on the skill development project, which I'll get into. The only thing about the conference is 18th May to 30th June. I start this on what I celebrate now. I'm saying we celebrate as World Mediators Day, which is Ken Cloke's birthday. Because for me, he's the face of the resolution revolution, and also the person that he is in terms of as a mediator, as the beautiful soul he is. It's just wonderful to have him. So that's the idea. So that's what it is all about. Skill development project, of course, you have to be part of. The idea again is something like the conference. Pick up your topic, you put out your session, people give. In this project, people will send you a gift. So it's not that we will put up a certain amount. We can, if you want to suggest something to them, that's up to you. I won't stop that, but it's a gifting culture, because I don't want anyone not to be able to attend these, but we'll keep them as Zoom sessions. We won't put all this out because there'll be interaction, that it be with people. So a lot of people are not very comfortable being live, so unlike some of us for whom this is their living room. So let them interact with you, and you also get to know them. So that's what the project is going to be. So you'll pick up not just one, as many topics as you want, and you do it at your convenience, at your time convenience. So it's not that I have to be part of sitting in it. I'll come in if it's in a time that it's convenient for me. Otherwise, let's just put out all this and let's have a lot of people interacting there. And of course, helps in the World Mediation Circle, because we are identifying people at the grassroots level who have the mindset, but they will not have access to all this material the mediation world has. And of course, they might not be able to afford it also. So let's go to everyone. Let's get as many people into the fold as possible. So Helen, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here again. And I am going to talk today about what I've learned from my students, and I'll try not to, here we go, from the beginning. And so if you are controlling a chat and anybody has any questions that they want to ask, or I'm speaking too quickly, or I've dozed off halfway through my own sentence, feel free to let me know. But first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for having me back. It's great to be here. Good morning, good evening. Wherever you are, it's great to see you. So I am going to move to my next slide.
And whichever date in whichever year you are in.
I have no idea. All I know is that it's 2 a.m. on Saturday morning. It's all good though. So thank you so much, and good morning from Canada. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for inviting me today. And the content that I'm bringing is what I've learned from my students in both my college classes that I refer to to those students as my students, and also from the Lightstone Academy that I refer to them as participants. So as an instructor in either capacity, I'm always very surprised by the wisdom that students bring to the table and the skill set that they have with having basically no or very little ADR experience. A lot of students have a natural gift. And I've noted also that sometimes students are familiar with the mediation process because they've lived through it themselves. Typically, in many instances, because unfortunately they had to go to family mediation. So I'm constantly asked about that. So when I'm in the college setting, I'm typically walking around the classroom and I'm sort of observing, I can have 30, 40 students in a class, and I'm observing the students and I sort of listen to what they're saying. And I'm listening to their comments, I'm watching their process, and of course, I'm there to help. In my own classes with the Lightstone Academy, I'm running classes on Zoom, so I can drop into breakout rooms and I listen to what's going on, I'm observing, and I also take a lot of notes. So a lot of the content today has come from note-taking from my own classes, of course, as well as college setting. And when I was getting ready for this presentation, I probably have 15 notebooks of comments and taking down what people have said. And it was kind of fun to go back and remember the students in that fun kind of way. All right, so some of the comments I've heard while I'm mediating, and I wrote them down and I took note and I wanted to bring it to everybody's attention. I love this. One choice at a time. And remember, the next choice is just around the corner. I want you to both talk to each other and not through each other, which I found, very wise. I find this an interesting one too. I'm not firm on my position. I'm firm on my feelings, which is, there's a lot of depth to that. I'm not firm on my position, which means there's flexibility there to talk about, some sort of a resolution. And I'm firm on my feelings. I always thought of that as, of course, a positive. What's behind that? And why is that important to you? So I'm going to go back to what's behind that. It's such a great question to ask because it just motivates people to answer. And one of my more recent students in his role plays, participant would say, what's behind that? And it just brings out so much information. It's great. And then why is that important to you? Now, I noticed with this one, you have to be careful of the tone of voice in which this is said. Why is that important to you? It could come across as like, what are you? What's going on here? But why is that important to you really also brings out more information where you can get to more feelings and more values of what's going on. But I have something, I tried to break my comments down into what I call moments. And here's the Indira moments. This was a participant by the name of Indira. And I did borrow this or liberate this image from appears to be dove eggs. So I'll get to the image in a second. So the Indira moment. So Indira was a participant in my introductory class called The Essentials. And the role play we were doing is a Harvard role play called the Carter Estate Negotiation. I love this negotiation. So here's the scenario. In this scenario, two brothers have lost their father and much of the estate is settled except for 6 items. One of them is the ring, not dissimilar to what you're looking at now. 4 items are negotiated, but the last item means that one of the brothers is going to have to pay the other brother $1,200. And so neither one of the brothers would move. They wouldn't budge. And it was very clear that what was previously a principled negotiation, so things were moving along quite well. What was a principled negotiation was now becoming positional. They would not budge over this $1,200. So it moved from a principled negotiation into a positional. So here's the moment. I call it the Indira moment. Indira, the mediator, paused and she took a gamble with the following comment. In similar situations where there's an impasse like this, the parties agreed to put $600 each towards a celebration of life for their father. So the two brothers immediately agreed to paying $600 each for the celebration of life for their father. What I learned from this absolutely brilliant moment. Number one, the gamble to introduce that evaluative piece, like, you know, it's been my experience that people will share, do something. Moving that evaluative piece into a facilitative process was a gamble that Indira took. It was well played. And it took, what was so great about it was it took the focus off the brothers, you know, and their positional stance. And because they no longer, because the money now was not going to the other brother and it was going to go towards something else, they both agreed to it. And I just thought it was such a great moment. Now, one of my favorite things that Indira says is something like, she says, in similar situations, implying she has done this a great deal, which of course she hasn't. So I really enjoyed, you know, there's a Yiddish word, which is, I enjoyed the chutzpah of it all, right? So it was quite good. All right. And Mediator Vikram, if you have anything to comment on, feel free to jump in. So now we're moving on to something called the Kelsey moment. And so Kelsey, here's the background on Kelsey. He's a 20-year lawyer. He's a senior lawyer with a great deal of experience as a lawyer and mediating, and he has just a natural skill set. So in the mediation models that I teach, you have what they call a case development with each party privately, and then you bring them to the mediation session. So here's how he would how his case developments would unfold. He followed this chart. So he had his number one, the unknown knowns. So things you thought you knew about, but it turns out you don't. So this is all how he started questioning his participants. The unknown unknowns, which is our top right, the future outcomes, the consequences, the impacts of a decision or an action. The bottom left is the known knowns. So, sorry, things that we know. So that's, you know, that's pretty straightforward. There are no risks. And number four, the known unknowns, things that you aren't, things you are aware of, but don't understand. So one of the examples would be switching from doing a business to taking a class in art. And this is how he focused his questioning, which I thought was really interesting. So that's the scenario. Here's the moment. I just enjoyed what I was watching Kelsey do because he was so competent. And what I learned from Kelsey was take Kelsey's skill and turn it into a teach piece. And that way, everybody, including me, benefited from his approach. So I always appreciate Kelsey for what he contributed. And here's another thing that Kelsey brought to the role play. And this is, you know, when the two parties are together, it assumes, of course, that the role play is on Zoom, and keep your mic on mute. I wouldn't have even thought of that, to be honest. Know who is in your room. You should be by yourself. So that's extremely difficult, of course, on a Zoom mediation. And then do not use chat. So usually for anybody that has a Zoom account, like Mediator, Vikram, I'm sure you know, when you use a Zoom account, you might also be receiving any private chat that's going on. So be very careful.
Can I just point out, Helen, I don't allow private chats. You can't chat with anyone else. I like it. I like people to talk about it rather than have that chat there. So I've disabled that private chat.
Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah. I think I got in trouble once for chatting during a meeting, and I don't know, they didn't like it so much. But anyway, that happens. So now the next one. So we're going to come back to Kelsey again. Now, this is what I call the Mark moment. And in my class, I talk about positions and class, and also in my own personal training. So I'm trying here to address positions and interests. And the position is what you want, and the underlying interests are why you want it. So in this example, it's all about a vehicle. Party A wants a pickup truck, party B wants a minivan. And so we're looking at, why do you want what you want? Why is that important to you? So now we have, in the scenario, we've got Mark, another senior lawyer. He's a family lawyer. He's got as much experience as a lawyer in mediating as Kelsey has, and they're hovering around that 20-year mark. This diagram hit home for Mark. He loved this diagram, and particularly because he saw people that were splitting up in this diagram. So he loved the diagram. He looked at party A in blue. He looked at party B in yellow, and he said to the class, when I see the shared interests, which is hopefully what people are going for, he loves that green area. And he said, exploit, exploit, exploit. Like, exploit that green area. You know it's shared. You know it's in common. So Mark clearly has a great deal of experience, and exploiting seems to be working for him and hopefully his clients. But to be honest, I found this very, very difficult, because I wasn't sure if I was actually presenting in my class to exploit people or not. And I didn't think I was. So when the class was done, and it was a 40-hour class, I needed to reflect on Mark and what I learned from him. So he had mentioned to me that he was taking my courses because in order to get designations in Canada, you have to have a certain amount of training. It's got to be taught by certain people. And that I realized, of course, that I was a stepping stone to a designation for him. So I really questioned, like, what could I deliver to somebody as senior as Mark and as senior as Kelsey? And so I thought, even if they learn one thing, that would be great. But I realized I'm bringing them the educational component that they need for an official Canadian designation. And I thought that was good, but it was a tough moment when I thought that maybe I'm not bringing them anything, but I realized I was. So, any questions so far?
Nothing. I would not want to spoil your flow.
Okay.
One comment is coming to me. I should have pointed out that on the mic thing, I think people should get a headphone set where the mics are really sensitive. So if I put my mic here, you can't hear me. You can't hear me even here. Even this.
It's not bad. Yeah.
So you don't pick up any sound from outside at all. So a little bit of a investment maybe, but I think that mic's a good idea. A good mic is a good idea.
All right. And let me know if there is, even though it's 2:15 in the morning, there is some traffic outside. So let me know if you can hear that, and I can close the window. So here's something else happened. So I call this the review moment. And so as a part-time instructor at a college, you're assessed by your students, and the program, your course is assessed, your program is assessed, excuse me, and you're assessed as a part-time faculty. Excuse me. So during one of my assessments, you get the pleasure or the displeasure of reading the personal comments, they're anonymous, that the students write. And one student wrote, "You imagine the most disorganized person on the planet and multiply it by 10,000, and that's Helen Lightstone." And I was devastated by this, like, because it's something that I'm always striving to work on. So then a couple of semesters later, I'm walking into a class and the student comes up to me and she said, I wasn't in class last week. Could you show me a particular document that you were talking about? So I open up my laptop and, go to the class that she's in, go to the file, go to the week that I'm teaching in, go to a file called handouts, and there's the handout that she was looking for. And she looked at me and she said, "Wow, are you ever organized?" And so I realized that it's all about perception, right? So here I'm the worst person on the planet, and to somebody else, I've got exceptional skills. So you just have to let it go. And then, so the second scenario is I at another college, I received another not so great report from a student. And the student actually wrote, you should get she writes a note to this college on the form that says, you really need to get an instructor that knows something about alternative dispute resolution. So that's me. And I said, I read it and I reflected on it. And my takeaway, what I learned from that is, had that comment been at the beginning of my teaching career, it probably would have ended it. But because now there's quite a lot of experience behind me, I can look at what she wrote. I don't agree with the fact that they need another ADR instructor. I'm pretty confident I know what I'm talking about. But she had other elements in the report card, my report, that were quite valid. And so my takeaway, what I learned from that is that you've got to, listen to what a participant is saying or a student is saying. And there was some elements of truth to her report. She found certain things repetitive and she was not wrong. So the takeaway is, thankfully I have the wisdom to sort of look at that and go, she's wrong about this, I think, but she's quite right about that. And then hopefully I can do something to change that. So this one I call the flirting moment. And so here's the situation. The class has started. I'm at the front of the classroom. I'm lecturing. Two students are texting each other. And it was, I'm standing at the front of the class and it was blatantly obvious because the text would come from the back of the classroom to the front of the classroom where this young woman was. She received the text, she smiled, right? And then you see her doing this. And then you see the guy at the back of the class smiling, right? And I could see this exchange going on throughout the entire class. So that was the scenario. The moment, it was just too cute. And then what I learned from it, I learned to have a little bit of fun. And there's no relevance to ADR in this. I just thought it was such a great moment that I wanted to share it with everybody. And the funny thing is, the students don't think we see what's going on. But it was a very, very cute moment. I have no idea what happened with them. Anyway.
The matchmaker Helen, is it?
Matchmaker Helen, I don't know. So here's another interesting thing that happened in class one year. So here's the scenario. I received a letter from the college one semester at the beginning of the semester telling the faculty that a student was identifying themselves as non-binary. And we should address them as, and I'm going to use the name John. And so I had, at that point, I had not heard of non-binary before, and I had no idea what it meant. So I emailed the student and I said, come and tell me what that's about, because I don't know. And so the student came and we had a good conversation. So the student was also transitioning, and she explained what non-binary meant and suggested it was okay for me to refer to her as a her, because as she said, I know the context of where I am. So she's in a college setting and she knew that this was going to freak out a number of people. It was going to be unusual for people. And so she said, yes, feel free to call me she or her. So the moment that I'm talking about, the non-binary topic came up in class, with her class, and the students wanted to know more about non-binary and the LGBTQ2S community in Toronto. And so we arranged that I would give her class time to talk about what the students wanted to know. What's it all about? Because many people didn't know that term. So it's basically a term that means somebody is not necessarily identifying as a man or a woman, and they can, so it expands outside just male or female, or does not fit any gender. So it was, when we had that class the week later, I wish I could draw that much focus in my class. It was like everybody was listening. Nobody was on their cell phones. And it was a very productive class. So what I learned, sometimes it's okay to let someone else take the lead and even go off topic. Also, because of this conversation, although it's I really have to catch myself, I try not to say, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my conversation today, ladies and gentlemen, because you don't know how people are now identifying. So during this current semester, a student started talking about the LGBTQ2S community and whether or not mediation existed for the LGBTQ2S community. So we had this conversation, and you could tell they were testing me. Like some of the students, they wanted to know, was I going to get rattled about talking about this? And no, I'm not going to get rattled about it. And the question came up about gender identity and how do you identify? So you can see on my name, I put she, her in brackets. So that's telling people that I identify as female. And so they wanted to know, how, Helen, in a mediation, are you, if that comes up, how do you address it? And I said, it's pretty simple. You just ask. Now, how would you like to be identified is not an uncommon question here. So it was an interesting conversation. I think people were relieved, and I think people were relieved to know that there is support. Now, I do have a colleague who wrote a book called When Gender is in Question. And so now, can I give her a plug if that's okay, or would that be terribly rude?
Totally up to you.
Totally up to me. Okay. Her name is Suzanne Shurkin, and her book is When Gender is in Question. And she mediates people who, families, when somebody in a family member wants to transition, how do they break the news to the family? And what does that look like? That is her specialty.
Helen, can I come in at this point?
Sure.
And if for me, of course, we are talking about the last slide. The point is that I think we are going too much into the identification on the she, her. Our language allows us to speak to each other without using she, her, him, him, and all. We can use it. I've tried in all my posts and otherwise also communication that you can use the name. Why do I have to say she? I can say Helen. So I think our language has to become neutral. I keep talking about, of course, neutrality in terms of the mediator is debatable, but in terms of our language, it is easy. In terms of greetings also, like we say, good morning, good evening, we don't know what time, wherever it is. Let's be neutral. Let's just choose those words which actually don't lead to anyone getting offended. So because look, for me, they're people. They're people. I mean, how they identify themselves, as long as it is not part of the whatever discussion you're having, why do we need to even bring that up? I mean, for me, it's the person. And as long as we can respect the person for the person that person is, I don't think we need to actually address them as she, her, or anything. We can easily, I've looked at it, I've tried it, I've never needed to use that she, her if the other person hasn't used it. If the other person says that, I mean, in terms of her or in their bio or whatever, then I would use it. Otherwise, not required. I'm seriously not required. Try it sometime. We don't need to use those words at all.
Yeah. Thank you. I tried to explain this to my dad. I don't know if you remember my dad, who's
of course I remember him. A wonderful person. Mort is
cool.
like
Mort it is. So like I said, his favorite saying is this, what I'm about to tell you is so dangerous, you're going to have to wear a parachute just to listen to it. So it's my favorite. But I engaged in a conversation about non-binary and what that means. And he just, he was not having it. That's all I can say. Not having it at all. Anyway, so thank you. Okay. So now my next moment is called the BATNA moment, your best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So here's the scenario. So this was several years ago. During one of my classes, I was introducing the concept of principled negotiation to my students, and we talk a lot about Roger Fisher and William Urey's book, Getting to Yes. And their steps separate the people from the problem, focus on the interest, not the positions, brainstorm for ideas, and use objective criteria. So they got that no problem, because it makes a lot of sense. And then in the conversation of the class, I introduced the concept of a BATNA. And so and it's meant to be used and to be prepared before the negotiation starts. So I introduced the BATNA. It's necessary to do it before, and it's also necessary to try and figure out the other person's BATNA as well. But the concept of a BATNA was providing them, like, people can't get their head wrapped around a BATNA and what that means. So typically I hear, well, is it another option on the table? So instead of paying $5, I'm going to offer $4.50. If it was a negotiation over X dollars, why don't I just change the amount of the X dollars? And why do I need to figure out their BATNA? And so students are getting stumped. And to this day, I'm clearly missing the boat on how to explain a BATNA properly. And then one student says, so a BATNA is actually setting you up to fail. And I went, yes, in a way it is. So, I mean, that's not the intent. The intent is not to actually move forward to fail at your negotiation. It's your backup plan in case the negotiation fails. So that was the moment when he said, so a BATNA is setting you up to fail. And what I learned from that is sometimes it's okay to let somebody else say it better than you can. And this student got it, and he put it in a way that the rest of the students understood what was going on. Okay, we're moving along. So this this is what I call the baby shark moment. And there's this whole song, it's a kid's song with baby shark and grandma shark and grandpa shark and the whole thing. Anyway, so here's this scenario. So one of my favorite teach pieces came out of a mediation that I observed many years ago. And a mediator, from what I recall, it was a wrongful dismissal. And so we had the person that was wrongfully dismissed and her counsel, and then a lawyer that had flown in from the States to participate, he was counsel for the company. So the mediation goes on for 5 hours and it settles. And what happened was the mediator, through no fault of his own, it was just an oversight, forgot to ask, do you have is everybody here who has the authority to settle? And he just forgot to ask. And he asked when he realized at the end of the mediation, that's when he asked. And the lawyer for the company said, I'm sorry, I actually don't have the authority to settle. So that's a bit of a problem. And so what happened was the mediator who just messed up a little bit, he said, he did extremely well after this. Of course, he said, well, does the company know that you're here today? Yes. Are they waiting for your call? Yes. Would you like to take a break and go call them now? Yes, I would. So everybody takes a break, and 15 minutes later, the lawyer comes back and he says, I'm really sorry, I don't have the authority to settle for that much money. And so essentially what happened was that was 5 hours of a waste of time. But for me, it was not a waste of time, because it spoke to the power of the authority to settle. I think also the human error of just making a mistake. And it also demonstrated to me that the lawyer was not prepared. Clearly came to a negotiation. He was flown in from the States and not prepared. So I teach my students, my participants, know your opening bid, know your target bid, know your resistance point in a deal, and know when you have to walk away. So I was telling this story to me, there's real value in that observation of it had to be 10 years ago. But anyway, I had a participant in my class, and she said, well, it could be something different. She said, maybe the company from the States sent in the baby shark with the intention that the mediation would never settle, which made me laugh. So what I learned was that maybe there was more than meets the eye here, and that settling was actually never on the table for the company in the States. And they sent in baby shark because they knew baby shark would never succeed, and poor baby shark was used. So I love that story. It's very cute. So here's something else. So this was sent to me by a student. So in the college setting, when I'm preparing my weekly classes, I always start with a mediation quote of the week. And it's just, it's something very similar to this. So it's in every week. And my next note here is, because I'm organized, at least I think I am. So in this moment, the student sent me this image to be included in future mediation quotes of the week. She was asking, Helen, I found this online. Would you include it? And I said, yes. So what I learned, mediation is starting to hit home with some students, and it is a very positive thing to see. And I think what really impressed me with this one is that this is a student in a paralegal program. And, the paralegal program is, ADR is, of course, alternative dispute resolution. It is an option to going to court. And many paralegals, of course, they want to advocate for somebody. They want to sue somebody. and they want to wipe the floor with somebody else. But they come into ADR, and I've noticed over the last number of years that people are really getting it, and they're seeing the value behind settling instead of going through a court process. I find that really, I find that really interesting, and I really like this one.
Oh, but you can't move the slide. That's a very important slide. I'll explain why. Because I've been talking about this. Again, this comes from last year's conference about the fact that parties and participants, that usage, and the parties comes from the court system. This is really important to explain it. On top is your court system and the parties, and here your participants all together considering how you can solve the issue or resolve the issue. And this is really important to show that, Helen, what you've done is you've given me something to put out there whenever I have to explain to it, because people just don't get it, because they've gone with that mindset all the time about two sides. This really, in a way, will explain it well.
Oh, that's great.
You're all together, and this is not just you and me. It's actually, if you bring in other people, I of course say you don't need to bring in the lawyers, but for a moment, if even the lawyers are, you're all on this side. It's not that also, I mean, they're all participants in that sense. And
yeah.
So that's
I heard I forgot this quote, one of my participants in the class, he was doing the role play of a mediator, and it was a, small claims court matter. And he said, sometimes court is not the best option for the parties. And it was just like, yeah, that's so true. And I get a lot of volunteers to be the disputants in the class. And one of my disputants is a retired judge in California. And he just listened to this young man come out with that comment. He went, I'm going to use that in my mediations, because you're right. Sometimes court is not the best option. And the other thing that I should have had in the previous PowerPoint is, it's just, sometimes court's not, yes. They said, sometimes, in a mediation, this is the only time the two parties actually have the opportunity to talk to each other, because in a court process, it's taken over by counsel and it's taken over by counsel, and the two parties never actually get to speak. This is your opportunity now. So I thought it was very, very wise.
And let's just, and like I said, let's keep them as parties if they're in the court system. Let's get them into becoming participants on this side. I think that's really important to put, because it in a way sends out that message also. Terminology does in some way affect people's mindset towards things. So if you keep them as parties, that adversarial aspect, you're still continuing it. So I really found that really nice that Jeannie was the one who that topic she'd picked up and she had brought it out. So I think that's really important.
Okay. All right. So moving along. All right. So how the student mediator chooses words is based on their thought process. And here's what I mean. And I did kind of liberate this from a previous presentation. This is the Vanessa moment. And so when she's working with parties, I call this the funnel system. So she just has this gift of taking a thought from one party, the thought from the other one. She creates a mutual problem-solving statement. She asks another question of both parties. It creates yet another mutual problem-solving statement. And she keeps just sort of going down and down until they get to a resolution. It's such an interesting process to watch her get from here to here, like that. So that's kind of fun. And then, of course, there's the parties, the Mark moment, who's very structured. Issue, we're gonna address issues 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I have mentioned my colleague of mine who you can see him just unraveling like the layers of the onion. He's just peeling back. And I think I even saw him in a class one day. I think he even had pen to paper. and he's asking questions and he's drawing this circle. It's really mesmerizing to watch him. He's great. And then a colleague of mine this man is brilliant, but he's like a lasso when he's trying to get a question of somebody. It's like he's got an idea in mind. He's like, boom, there you go. There's the question. And the conversation goes everywhere. So what I've learned from those 4 different styles is there is no right or wrong way to ask questions or to approach your people. So this one, excuse me, I call the popcorn moment. And so here's the scenario. So during one of my classes last year, this is quite fun, 2 students are engaged in a co-mediation model only because the number of students in the class we had to have a co-mediation model. And the mediation seemed to be going well at first. But as I was walking through the classroom, I noticed that one of the 2 mediators was just leaning back a little bit and letting her classmate basically do all the work. So I kind of said to her, jump in when you can, ask a question. If you see she needs some help, ask something, but it never happened. And so it's getting tense. Things are getting heated. And then when we debriefed as a class, I said, well, how did that co-mediation model work for you? And because they were the only 2 that had that luxury, and I'm a big fan of the co-mediation model, I think it should be used in quite a bit more. So she said, I really had a problem assisting my friend. She said, because I was so engrossed in the storyline. She said, I just wanted to get a box of popcorn and just watch what was happening. So anyway, it was an interesting moment. She clearly became very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not that she was distracted, but she became very disengaged with the process. And so it reminded me, so that was the moment when she took this back seat and she wanted to eat popcorn to watch what was going on. But it did remind me of when I first started out. I mean, it's amazing to listen to stuff people go through. And I remember thinking, this is like, some of the scenarios are so difficult. But my takeaway was that you have to, you have to walk with parties on their journey. You have to be with them on their journey, and you have to engage more than wanting to sit back and watch what's taking place. So you're walking with them on their journey, and they are inviting you, and I believe trusting you to sort of keep their information. So it was an important thing. Excuse me, sorry about that. So my next slide is a little bit more difficult. So this one, and sometimes life is just not fair, and there's illness, cancer, and death. So life happens, as does death. I've seen students return from, Christmas or winter breaks, having gone through, chemo and radiation. I've had students, there was one particular student, she was 19 maybe, trying to adopt her niece because her sister was a drug addict. I had a student come to class one afternoon in a business suit because he had just buried his father in the morning. And so, and I've seen these 2 students were both students of mine, and I photographed their wedding. So this is one of the photographs that I took. And then within 2 years, the young woman on the left had passed away from cancer. So, so when people are sharing, the moments here are the times that people share their life with you, right? And the good stuff and the bad stuff that they're going through, that you have to sort of embrace and listen to them. And I noted, my takeaway is that students are very, very resilient. I mean, to be able to come back to class after burying your father that morning and continue, you know, going to classes, even though they've got cancer and what have you. It's like, you know, it's quite a moving thing to be part of their journey. And that, you know, and they've touched me even though they may not know it. So, so I guess, you know, just honor the students too, because some of them go through some terrible stuff. And so then there's this one, because I remember everybody like this from the last presentation. A mediator hasn't worked, so I brought in everybody's mom. And I thought maybe it was time to lift things up. There's no particular takeaway from this, but I know everybody loved that.
Oh, no,
one.
There's a major takeaway from this. I've been talking
What's
about this, that the aspect. Look, the thing is that I keep saying that, of course, the aspect of mediators not being made in 40-hour factories. And I'm saying that in terms of the mothers and the motherly instinct and all that, bringing that as a mediator, I think is really important, and I think really works. And I'm saying that moms, of course, themselves being mediators, I mean, that's of course happening. It's always happening. They're doing that. But in the other sense is that instinct to be able to look at it from that perspective. And this is mediations that I'm talking about. Of course, mediation, that word, how people perceive mediation itself can be a lot of different ways. And like settlement conferences, we won't maybe have that aspect of it. But the mediation that I'm talking about, I think what moms bring in terms of the heart, soul, spirituality part of it, I think that's, it's important to put that out. Yep.
Yeah. And yes, I think you're right. And then also if there's food, you know, food involved, because, you know, that always makes it's comfort food, right? If mom's made something that's special to whatever's going on. So thanks for that. I do love this one. I think it's fun. And the next one, but here's what I really learned for my students. We've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs with Wi-Fi at the bottom. So, oh, here somebody's drag racing just outside my mother's building here. So we're kind of wrapping up the presentation now. Oh, hold on 2 seconds. And so if anyone is curious here as to where I'm going today when I wake up in a couple of hours, so I'm going to Niagara Falls, which is not too far from where I live right now. And then just a little bit, well, closer to Niagara Falls is a lovely yet a little bit touristy town called Niagara-on-the-Lake. So that's a little bit of Canada for you. And that is just a synopsis. That's the presentation. I have a rose from my garden here because I know I had a dinner plate hibiscus in one of my presentations. And so thank you so much. That's basically what I've learned from my students in X number of years of teaching part-time.
And wonderful. I hope the students have learned more from you than you've learned from them.
One could only hope. You know, the colleges keep inviting me back to teach, so I guess
I mean, of course you are. Of course you have. But I think the other part is that we have to put it out there, that photography and mediation, that aspect that you put. I think we maybe just need to put that session in that skill development project. I think that's photography and mediation is a really nice one that you've done.
Thank you.
But then, Helen, have you in Niagara Falls? Have you gone on that boat under the falls?
I have. Nice. And you know, they sell you little raincoats to put over you because you are going to be soaked by the end of it.
But what is it like just looking up from there onto the water, all that water coming down?
Well, it's loud, I can tell you that. It's very loud. It's quite something. I mean, it is a spectacular sight. And the Canadians, you see, so the Canadians have part of the falls and the Americans have part of it. And, you know, it brings Canadians great joy that we got the better deal. We got the better part of the falls than they did. So
it's a major difference, actually. It's a major difference between the two, just visually.
Yeah, it's quite something. And but you know, there's the lovely Niagara Falls side, and then if you just turn the other direction, then it's like tourist town, you know. And but they do try to keep the falls, you know, pretty pristine, and there's nothing terribly tacky by the water. And then a couple of years ago, there's a very famous tightrope walker, and he walked across the falls, you know, on a tightrope. And so, I mean, it was tense. And then when he sort of stepped foot onto Canadian soil, there was Canadian customs there asking him for his passport.
But I mean, these guys don't have any safety measures at all.
They had none. There was nothing.
Wow.
I want to say the gentleman's name is Walanda. He's a you know, he does like I think he's walked across the Grand Canyon, Niagara Falls. I think this is his thing.
Not even something tied to that. Nothing at all. That's amazing. Nothing. That's like,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, can I see your passport?
That's a
it's kind of funny.
Officials are going to be officials, whatever. The bureaucracy is going to be bureaucracy. You can't change them, whatever happens.
You're so right. Yeah.
So wonderful
Thank you.
Presentation obviously is, and of course what you bring in really is something which is important. So I think what we have to do now is that, of course, last day of the conference, please come for that session. So we just talk about, of course, the World Mediation Circle and the skill development project. Yes, we'll also talk about the learnings and key takeaways if you watched other sessions, and let's just interact with each other. So please do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and of course, and please join other sessions. You can, I mean, Zoom link remains the same. Just come in, even if it's for a short while. Just little comment, little something.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for, of course, waking up at this time, and have a good trip.
Pleasure.
Have a good trip. And
thank you. I'll send a couple of photographs.
Yes, you must do that. That's very important. That's the only way I'm going to travel, because I think this chair is what I'm stuck to.
I think so. I was just gonna ask, have you been to North America, or have you been to the falls?
I've been to the falls.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good.
So it's quite a sight. But only thing is that, I mean, the younger you are, I think it obviously the scale looks much larger, I'm sure, as you grow older. I don't know whether the scale would look the same. I don't know about you. I'm sure you would. Does it look the same for you as you've grown up?
Listen, I'll be honest, I'm very short, so everything looks huge to me.
No, I'm sure age makes a difference. I feel I don't know, because when you're younger, I think you just look at things from it. It's just huge. It's huge. I mean, we look at it. But today, when you go back, does it seem as huge to you? Is what? Please tell me when you get there. It does it look as huge for you every time you go or not? The scale really matters. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
See you soon. And of course, when are we seeing Mort? Mort, we have to see Mort. He was really interesting.
He's great. So anytime.
Please bring him in. He's an interesting. I don't want to use the word character. I hope you don't mind. He's an interesting character.
No, it's all good. Yeah, no, he's I mean, he in November, this past November, on Remembrance Day, they had, I don't know if I told you this, but hockey, of course, is a big sport here. And so they had 4 war vets drop the puck at the Remembrance Day hockey game with the Toronto Maple Leafs and the whole thing. So, I mean, it was a big deal. My dad was one of them. Wow. So it was quite an honor. It was pretty cool. And they referred to him, they did a phenomenal introduction of the 4 war vets, and they introduced my dad as Mortimer Mort Lightstone. It was great fun. It was very good.
He himself is great fun. That's what I really like that. But Helen, what you're going to do is also please think of all the topics that you're going to pick up in the project. Whatever topics you want to pick up, and of course consider what you want to do. I mean, let it be gifts or want to put a certain amount to it. I let that to you to consider.
Okay.
But I mean, have you looked at the schedule? You've seen all the other topics. Okay.
Oh yeah.
So you know what's coming up. So perfect.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you so
night. Good
much.
morning. I don't know what to
Good
say to you.
morning.
We had to do neutral greetings, but in your case, we know what the time is. So
I know. It's all good. It's all good.
see you then.
All right.
Bye.